Dear colleagues, welcome to the LGMA monthly webinar, the March edition. We'll just give it a couple of minutes for all our colleagues to settle down so that we're not disturbed and they can also focus. So bear with us. In the next minute, we will start. So I think we're more or less settled. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Welcome to the monthly webinar of the Local Governments and Municipal Authorities Constituency, presented by ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability, as its focal point. My name is Yunus Erikan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE World Secretariat based in Bonn. I would like to take you through the webinar today. Those who have not joined before, a couple of housekeeping rules. So we keep this webinar in a format that starts with a presentation, and it is shared by some participants sometimes. We'll touch upon this, and it usually finishes around the 40 minutes or so, and then we open the floor for question and answer. If there are any burning issues, you can always type in the chat box or Q&A box. This session is also recorded, and it is also made available publicly on ICLE's YouTube channel and other platforms. So once again, welcome to this round. So let's start by our agenda for today. We will have a basic introduction to LGMA. We have some updates. It's not always the same, so I hope those who are seasoned for our webinars will not be that much bored, but it's good to have some catch-ups. And we will go through the calendar. It's a bit we made it a bit more consolidated, so we will go through that. And you may remember, for the first 2 months of this year, we focused a bit more the priorities, the topics, the themes, the events that may come up. Now they are more or less settled, and starting from the March, actually we are seeing that increase of opportunities of engagement evolving, and outcomes are coming. So we will go back to our regular style, where we will go through what has happened since our last webinar. Then we've prioritized some topics on our agenda, and we will conclude by upcoming events. In today's session, it was one of those cases where we had a privilege to have a special guest, Alison Gillard, Dublin City Councillor and COP27 rapporteur for Committee of the Regions. She joined us in the morning session. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us here today, but I will try to summarize. She was representing LGMA constituency at the Copenhagen Ministerial that happened 10 days ago. But those who are interested, her intervention, her update to our constituency in the morning webinar is recorded, and you can also listen to her in that webinar. And we will also check with her whether we could turn down her points into a kind of a blog, and we can release and share with all of you. I know my colleague Ingrid will join us at the end towards the end of this or the second half of this webinar, to take us through the Convention on Migratory Species and Ramsar processes, because these are the nature-related agendas, which is chaired or facilitated by ICLE's Cities Biodiversity Center. With this, just wanted to, before going into the details, wanted to remind us again, very devastating stories happening across the world. The last webinar was on the 16th of February. It was just 10 days after the earthquake that has hit Turkey and Syria. And we had worked with ICLE Global Executive Committee member Tunç Soyer about his call for support and the way he has supported those earthquake hit regions in Turkey with a demonstration of global solidarity. Since then, he had organized an interesting, innovative telethon, they call it, that you can raise funds, donations. And it was great because we have seen so many diverse members of LGMA constituency from Eurocities to UCLG and ICLE Vice President Mayor Arve. And that was actually a good demonstration of how we can help each other. However, a couple of days ago, or let's say weeks ago, we had another devastating natural disaster, which is the cyclone Freddy, which has been recognized as the longest lasting cyclone in the history of recordings. It lasted for around 40 days or so, and to the coast of Mozambique, Eastern Africa, it hit twice. And obviously, the way cyclone and the earthquake hit, the impacts are slightly different in terms of their structures and then the way the locations are impacted. In the case of Mozambique and Malawi, unfortunately, there were also a couple of days where our people living in these regions were lost their connection, and unfortunately, let's be realistic, compared to, for example, Turkey, they are much less resourced. We're aware they're still suffering lack of electricity, lack of tap water, drinking water. And here you can see an appeal from Mayor of Quelimane, Manuel de Araujo, who is very familiar in the LGMA constituency, be it in the climate negotiations, be it in the biodiversity. He had made an appeal that he is under huge pressure to support his inhabitants, and but he's under huge need as well. So his call was that how could I help? How could I felt helpless. How could I help others when I also needed help? That was a shocking quote from him. So ICLE Africa Secretariat has organized a joint call to support him and even explore additional fundraising opportunities. We first of all express our solidarity with Mayor Araujo and all his peers in Malawi, in Mozambique. This is again a stark reality for all of us, that his disasters, especially nature-related disasters, are increasing in frequency, intensity, and our resources are getting much limited. Quelimane has been demonstrating very pioneering examples of sustainable city, but once again, just like 5 years ago, all the infrastructure of the city is vanished. The city is still suffering a housing problem, which really is giving us signal that, especially when we're discussing loss and damage and all this stuff, we have to think about how we mobilize donations or technical or infrastructure capacity support to those disaster hit regions before and as quick as possible, as these are already beyond the capacity of those local leaders. So once again, this is another signal where we have to increase our efforts on ambitious climate action. Let's continue about just a recap of LGMA, the constituency in the UNFCCC process. We have 9 major groups, a legacy from Agenda 21 in 1992. ICLE and local governments have been there since the beginning, along with business and environmental groups. In time, of course, the way we are engaging are changed, and over these years, we are now able to formulate under 4 main headings. So we're able to influence the negotiations. We're providing inputs by our deliberations, interventions, submissions, and workshop participations and meeting participations. We are involved in the action agenda that has evolved, especially after Paris Agreement, that not a negotiation agenda, but a much more partnership and result-oriented cross-stakeholder initiatives under the high-level champions and Marrakesh partnership. Then we know the climate process is led by every year in a different country and different region. These presidencies, they are called, are having their own priorities and their new teams. Every year they are starting from scratch. Sometimes, if they have resources, they can start preparations earlier, 1 year or 2 years earlier. That gives them, of course, a capacity to understand the situation better. But for all the COP presidencies, it's a big challenge, and any national government who's hosting a climate conference is going through huge sacrifices and challenges. In this regard, we are trying to support them, and especially since every time they are trying to redesign, or not redesign, but introduce new elements, we are trying to make sure that they complement what is achieved in the previous years, so that they don't start from scratch. We must confess, we enjoyed all these years a very strong relation with the presidencies in different, of course, scale or level. And we're very confident that we will continue with the Emirates presidency as well. And finally, the UNFCCC is a party-driven process. They say that's the language they use, means it is the national governments who define the agenda, who approve the decisions. Obviously, we have a lot of national governments who are more and more eager to support multi-level action, both at home and globally at the UN processes. And we are trying to make sure we have a certain dialogue with them, that we are connected to them and we are engaging with them, so that they can be better informed about our inputs, and they can help us to debate these proposals and amendments if needed. Those who are familiar, we are usually using two main channels. We are having an email list that is sharing updates, and we have this monthly webinars. I think in the past 5 years we have been repeating this. We have seen, especially during the COP in Glasgow and Sharm el Sheikh, the benefit of using our online capacities, and the fact that the UNFCCC process is now shifting its emphasis to the implementation, which means action at the local level, at home, is more important. We thought it is better we start to share this information much regularly and much more widely. Therefore, in addition to our webinars, we now are started our LGMA monthly bulletins, electronic newsletters. The first two issues are already available. And we encourage you to subscribe, because that is an opportunity for you to receive all the topics that we covered here, most of them, and you can share, and you can even contribute. This is an open space for all the LGMA partners. We try to make sure that we use this space as our collective wisdom and intelligence. And in that sense, we believe it's a very helpful tool for us to keep our community together and prepare better throughout the year. In that regard, now what we have consolidated, as you may remember in the past two webinars, we have tried to map what will happen during this year. It was the early days of the year, and we now gathered all these intelligence with those which are much more, let's say, strategic importance. There are a lot of technical meetings or preparatory meetings, but these for us are the ones that are really the most important ones throughout the year. We captured them as the UN agenda, UN and UNFCCC agenda. They are also different in nature, but there is more consistency. At least it's a United Nations system part of it. Then there is this global events, which are led by countries or a group of countries like G7, G20, or individually. Some of them are also putting additional elements. So we wanted to cover this. Again, the authority, the leading forces are there, the national governments. And then finally, we have our own agendas. We have our own summits. We have our own processes where we capture, we get together. So this is LGMA-led events. And then we also wanted to make sure that this is strongly connected to all the other previous agendas. I will go through it a bit more in details, but this document is available now on our bulletins, and will be on our website. And we also have worked with all of you a longer list of the LGMA calendar, which is around 70 or 80 events. And every day there are new things, new ones coming up. So we're trying to keep this updated. So we will also keep this available so that we track our participation. And of course, this is helping us to prepare better in upcoming weeks and months, and to make sure we make sure that our inputs are appropriately recorded, and we can monitor the outcomes. just a recap of what we achieved in Glasgow. Sharm el Sheikh. So first of all, we assume or we perceive Glasgow and Sharm el Sheikh as part of one big package. So in that sense, Glasgow represents ambition and Sharm el Sheikh represents justice, especially after 6 years of the Global North led COP processes. Sharm el Sheikh was the first time Global South was hosting it. Obviously, climate justice was a priority topic for them, and we're very happy this loss and damage agenda is now on the table and it's even evolving. Today, they already have concluded the first meeting of the transitional committee. For us, over all these years, of course, there will be still some nitty-gritty details like the structure of the fund or some financial elements of Article 6.8 or the non-market approaches. There's always a room for negotiation, but the real implementation doesn't need to wait for COP decisions. For now, what is more important is the governance of this process, that all levels of governments are appropriately engaged and respected, capacity building to all our leaders and staff, and finance, which is the right resources going to the right places. That is the good news that is coming out. What is the essential is that we are seeing this in all these outcomes from COP27, be it national initiatives from US to Japan and others, EU, or the global initiatives like the Surge, the Urbanization Ministerial. The new normal of the second phase of the Paris Agreement is that multi-level action and sustainable urbanization will be playing a key role. This is for us an essential that is felt every passing day. So that's something that we're proud of. And there is also something that is inevitable to discuss, or it's impossible to hide this anymore or ignore this anymore, is that if we're in the second phase of the Paris Agreement with a new understanding of multi-level and all these approaches, it is clear that the COPs under the age of digitalization cannot continue like that. It's impossible to get a meaningful result with this 50,000, 60,000 people. And I think we also don't need that much in order to get a meaningful outcome, as long as we can make their voices heard. Therefore, we are expecting that there are more and more discussions coming up here and there under UNFCCC or outside UNFCCC, and we would like to particularly participate in relation to our vision of the global stocktake, which we will discuss more in a couple of minutes later. So on the way to Dubai, what are the key areas we are focusing now? Is first of all the operationalization of the initiative that we kicked off in Sharm el Sheikh, the Surge. Obviously, it has its own merits and it has its own challenges, because first of all, it is led by a presidency and in collaboration with UN Habitat, where we support as a LGMA focal point, but we have to respect those the processes that comes through UN and presidency. We'll hope the Emirates will continue this spirit, especially with the second urbanization ministerial at COP28, and we will seek more updates, especially in the upcoming UN Habitat Assembly and on the word towards the World Urban Forum to make sure the Surge is really being an implementation or delivery mechanism for us for our climate ambition at all sectors, and that urbanization is holistically reflected to the UNFCCC process. I will talk about more on the stocktake, therefore I'm not talking here, but stocktake is our biggest agenda, and one thing that we should be aware of in the Surge, we have to respect some procedural and institutional arrangements by UN Habitat and COP presidencies, but in the global stocktake, it is free because it's in the hands of our leaders. It's in the hands of our constituency. Any city, any region who wishes to contribute to the stocktake can do this. Therefore, we do not see this as decoupled processes. There is, of course, complementarity, but they don't have to necessarily wait for each other. So that's why it is important that while we work on the operationalization of the Surge, this year, we will invest particular our efforts to the stocktake, and as we said, we go to that shortly. And the third, of course, UNFCCC is evolving. We said our engagement throughout the year, and it becomes clear, those who are in this space for longer than 4 years, you may remember that before COVID, there was always the regular June meetings in Bonn. And because of ICLE being hosted in the city of Bonn at the same time with the seat of Secretariat, and because of city of Bonn being so active in the climate processes, we were enjoying our annual event Resident Cities, which was back to back to this negotiations here. Over the past 4 years, it turned into 3 years, it turned into virtual platform. Starting from this year onwards, we will be once again making this as an in-person event, at least during the UNEF's negotiations. And throughout the year, Daring Cities will continue in virtual form. But this is now giving us, especially if you recall my previous slide, there is high likelihood that the role of the Bonn conference will be even more, especially for us when we have so much good relation with Germany as the host country, as a key member of the multi-level Friends of Multi-Level Action. We can use this as enabling us strategic discussions with delegations, with Friends of Multi-Level Action, and then prepare for our engagement towards and at COP28, at COP at the end of the year. Therefore, we would like to use this model more effectively. And as you remember, in the pavilion, Blue Zone Pavilion, we enjoyed in Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh, that we will continue this in Dubai as well. I will not spend too much time in this process. This shows again who is who. In the leadership, obviously, Egyptian delegation is leading this process as their host, or as their presidency term. They have just hosted this transitional committee and the Copenhagen Climate Ministerial. But of course, Emirates is coming more aggressively with new teams, with new mechanisms, offers, and interactions. In that regard, we will see there was an important update from the presidency, and we will touch upon this in more detail. But in that chart, there's nothing new that we haven't covered before. So let's now time for our recap of what has it achieved since 16th of February. It's more than a month. It was almost 4 weeks now. We wanted to follow this same logic. What has happened in the UN, UNFC space, what is going on in the global national space, and what is our LGMA. If you look at this, the most important thing that is relevant for us, on the 9th of March, Bloomberg and COP28 presidency announced a partnership. It is directly related to cities and subnationals as well. First of all, they commit to bring more mayors, or highest number of mayors, to the Leaders Summit in the first couple of days. In the past, in Glasgow and in Sharm el-Sheikh, we had only one mayor. It was in C40 chair, Eric Garcetti, mayor of Los Angeles in Glasgow, and Tokyo governor in Sharm el-Sheikh. We didn't have any additional opportunities. So this is a positive opportunity that there may be more room for mayors and governors to play an active role in this process. We will watch this space, and we will try to contribute. In parallel, Bloomberg and Philanthropies and Presidency have announced that they will work on some capacity building activities. And in that sense, several LGMA partners, C40, GCOM, Under 2 Coalition, and America is in Coalition are addressed as the partner. So the more they make us available their plans, we will be sharing these with you, and we will try to make sure that we are effectively engaged. This was announced as after a call of Bloomberg and COP28 presidency with C40 steering committee and GCOM mayoral board. In that meeting, Chef Shawn Mayer, and who was actively involved in the LGMA delegation in COP27, was also invited because of his role in the GCOM board as an advisor or ambassador. Unfortunately, he didn't have chance to share his insights verbally, but we communicated his speech to the presidency teams, and he highlighted 3 points that is very much relevant to the ideas that we have expressed in the LGMA strategy. First, we really want His Excellency Al Jaber to highlight more his role as the Masdar City CEO. You all know he has been too much discussed about his role as the chair or CEO of ADNOC, the National Oil and Gas Company. Of course, there are a lot of very rightful concerns in terms of conflict of interest. But we also are aware he's equally CEO of another process called Masdar City. He's not the mayor, but he is responsible of the innovation through Masdar City. If he brings this more effectively into the agenda he will lead in Dubai, this will strengthen LGMA and multi-level action and sustainable urbanization in its entirety. That's our position. In that regard, we hope this feedbacks will help us to help him also to shift his mind. And it's important. Just imagine, um, for the Sharm el Sheikh, our discussion with the presidency already started only after June, so it's not too late. We believe there will be a moment where Al Jaber, His Excellency Al Jaber, will start to speak more about what is the importance of Masdar City. Of course, a different context, but still, how can it contribute to the Paris Agreement and global stocktake, building on what LGMA will bring to the table. So it's a two-way relation. Second, we requested him to confirm he includes in the agenda the second urbanization climate ministerial. There are a lot of things coming up from the G7 process as well, so we hope this will be accepted as well, and there are signals that we're on the right track. Third, the COP28 president has confirmed that they are considering to offer space, the blue zone space, blue zone pavilion space for several constituencies. And we also wanted the LGMA multi-level action pavilion to benefit from this vision. So, and we are also received assurance that this message has been taken up by the presidency, and we look forward to their response in that regard. While this was going on, what was important in the UN-UNFCCC agenda is the transitional committee has met. Unfortunately, we could not manage to secure an in-person participation. The whole interventions are available on YouTube, but there was no LGMA representative there, unfortunately. Regional climate weeks are announced in September and October in Africa, Latin America, and Middle East, and we will make sure that these are also areas where we will contribute actively. In Copenhagen, there was this traditional March ministerial. This is a tradition that Copenhagen, the Danish government, has started since last year. We believe it's an opportunity. They are informal, but they play a huge role, that at the beginning of the year, ministers map what are their priorities or what are the conflicting issues. As reported by our representative, Alison Gilliland, again, the discussion about operationalization of the loss and damage fund to be tied to the raise of ambition, a climate mitigation ambition, which is a position of the EU, of course, is an important point. And in the morning with Alison Gilliland, we discussed this is extremely important, why the local contributions could be more visible. The logic would be that if the developed countries, especially this recognition, the G7 process, if they are so serious in bringing new opportunities to cities and regions in the G7 countries, we could expect that they could also say that, look, we would like to use this inputs to the national commitments, and because of our voluntary or because of their mandated emission mitigation and adaptation actions, we will increase our national ambition. If the developed country can say that, it can easily be then example to the global south, saying that we are raising ambition, so let's agree on the fund as well. So this was an issue we discussed very heavily. Councillor Gilliland particularly addressed the need to position ourselves with as equal footing as the business community, although we know the big companies are playing more role here in this influencing space, but that's why we're bringing the stocktake into the process. And stocktake discussions, Councillor Gilliland reported to us that there's a huge expectation for local governments involvement in the process, and we will see that shortly. UN Water Conference was convened in New York, and it was not a negotiation session, and it was in fact a mobilization of actors. It was an agenda that was too much ignored in the UN. There's been around 700 initiatives, and there are critical contributions from the LGMA constituency, especially water as a public service, and it was an emphasis, and relation to disasters and water was also discussed heavily. The AR6, the sixth assessment report, finally summary and synthesis report was released this year, this week. No, sorry, last week. Um, the important thing is that the summary for urban policymakers was released in Sharm el Sheikh 4 months before the official public release of the national policymakers summary. That shows once again our leadership and our eagerness to take the leadership and climate action. What is important, obviously, in the summary report, you can see a lot of urban or mitigation adaptation areas in the local context. But I think, as far as I know, there was, for the first time in the summary for policymakers, a reference to multi-level. It was not recognized in the previous summary for policymakers of AR5, 4, 3. And that is, again, demonstrating why we have to act on initiatives like SURGE or Climate and Urbanization Ministerial, so that multi-level, the concept of multi-level action becomes materialized and becomes concretized, let's say. At the global and national level, Japan, together with US, hosted the Zero Carbon City International Forum. This was the first time we were engaged with UNFCCC Executive Secretary. He has sent a very nice video message. We have connected to the US subnational diplomacy representative Nina Hachigan, as well as Japanese Minister of Environment. So this is, again, a good way of our relation with the national government. And of course, there were so many examples of zero carbon city across the world. In terms of our progress, we were also very busy. We have just the day after the Japanese summit, the Japanese forum, we hosted the Urban 7 Mayor Summit in Tokyo with the participation of the 7 networks of the 7 G7 countries, local government networks, as well as partners, ICLE, Global Parliament of Mayors, as well as UCLG as a network partner. The text, the declaration text, has a strong element of the welcoming surge and pushing for COP28 urbanization climate ministerial. And this was something that is valuable for us, because in the next couple of months, we will use this opportunity. This document was presented in person to Japanese Ministry of Environment, Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, Prime Minister's Office, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, so that they can hand over this to the G7 nations. The Scottish government has released an important loss and damage report just before the transitional committee meeting. In fact, that is also a good collection of good practices. So we hope this will be helping to the work of the presidency and also the transitional committee. And on the adaptation side, we had the submission by Regions 4 and Committee of the Regions to the stocktake. I would like to continue with the stocktake discussion, and I see my colleague Ingrid has joined up, so she will complement when I finish the stocktake agenda. The stocktake is a process that is officially a mandated activity for 3 main reasons. First of all, it's a mandated activity not just for parties, but also local and regional governments. And the logic is that we are recognizing the Paris Agreement in the preamble that are recognizing the importance of all levels of government. So therefore, we have a responsibility to contribute into the Paris Agreement stocktake process. Second, in Glasgow, we have achieved an additional strengthened wording in the preamble, which is recognizing the urgent need for multi-level and cooperative action. Again, it's a duty for us to formulate, and stocktake is an example for that. And the third, in June last year, when the process kicked off for the first time, we as LGMA worked hard to influence the negotiators to recognize that this kind of meetings should not be limited to only the COP, the Dubai, Bonn, Sharm el Sheikh. It has to be discussed across all cities and all capitals, at least. The good news that in June, after all these discussions, it was the first technical dialogue, we managed to get a decision. They encouraged, or they acknowledged, that this stocktake will receive input from local and national level. And that's giving us the 3 main legal mandates that if any city, if any local and regional government wants to host a stocktake process at the city hall, they have a reason to do that, and they have a mandate to do that. Secondly, this kind of interactions is not new for us. We have been doing this, especially at the local level, especially for climate emergency. We have had a lot of discussions on that. But we also had this Talanoa dialogue, which was really very, very opening the doors to the UNFCCC space to bring local and national governments together. And we had made huge achievements in the Talanoa era. In a short time frame, we made this kind of interactions. Therefore, we are not starting from scratch. We already have a capacity and an experience on that. But when it comes to convincing our municipal administrations, regional governments, we have to be more specific. We have to be answering very clearly why, what, and how questions. Again, why we need local community engagement, because when it comes to the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the national governments, the global leaders, they all have to connect with our communities. And that's an opportunity for us to bring this discussion back to the table, especially to drive all of us to climate emergency mode of action. So it's not just a government action, but across society, it has to be an agenda. What shall we discuss? In the Talanoa dialogues, we did not have any of those commitments and plans. Now, it is time for us to review our national plans, to review what we have committed to at the local level, and how we address climate justice, how we address urban poor, disadvantaged communities, how to bring them back on board. And how, in fact, this is an innovation that we're introducing. If we are saying that COPs do not need so many people in this discussions because implementation will not take place at COP, but if it is at the local level, then we can also say that city halls have regular agendas every week, every month, but it is always focused to the local debate. Maybe during this years of stock take for climate emergency, we can encourage that every city hall reserve, dedicate at least half a day a discussion on climate or even SDGs that then they communicate to the UN. And in fact, if we can make this as a culture, this could really be helping us to introduce a new concept of multi-level collaboration. In that sense, we are not only limiting ourselves for this year's stocktake, but once we see the examples, we're confident that there will be appetite to replicate it in the upcoming years, especially when our local and regional governments are questioned or requested to ensure the transparency of their commitments, to report about their achievements. Having such a meeting every year is an opportunity for them to report or to respond to those expectations of transparency and accountability. What we would like to recommend that in the discussion, you start, especially your local and local commitments, climate commitments, race to zero, climate emergency declarations. Are you on track? Is your community aware of it? Have you made progress? What are your bottlenecks? This is an opportunity for you to discuss openly. Second, ask about your national government. What is the climate action plan? What are they offering to the urban development in your city? Let's make sure there is a relation between those two. And if not, let's make sure the next one is much better connected. And third, as we said, climate justice domestically and across the world, especially an issue that global north cities should be responding very clearly. Last week, we had the introductory webinars with ICLE US. We are expecting a couple of cities in the US like Miami, New Hampshire, or even New York City would be starting to host around 22nd of April, the Earth Day, because it's such an important moment in the US. But we are assuming that once we hear the first examples, in time, we may have new volunteers to come up, but we can use the Bonn conference as a milestone that we can inform both our members and the UNFCCC community. So starting from the second half of the year, we're expecting more and more cities to convene such cities and regions to convene such events. We're already aware, for example, Utrecht has already scheduled 18th of October for their gathering with the youth in the Utrecht, and then they will also be eager to shape this in that regard. And we're in touch with the Yungo constituency. They're also considering to work with us. And the more we show those examples, we can feed to the COP28 and shape the discussion there. Before giving the floor to Ingrid, let me once again underline that as we have discussed, we are shifting the acceleration of action before COP and at the moment at the local level. And that's the reason why we're having our bulletins. That's the reason why we're encouraging stocktake. But we will still be present in the blue zone at COP28. And we want to make it even better, much more effective. In the morning, we had good discussions with all the partners. We are hoping there will be some offers from the presidency. Scottish government is continuing to offer their support. Therefore, we are now encouraging all of the LGMA community to indicate their interest to work with us at the pavilion. You can share your ideas, plans, so that we can start shaping this process together. So in this chat box, you will see a link where you can contribute in terms of providing your inputs to the design of the LGMA pavilion again. So with this, let me give back the floor to Ingrid, where she will take us through the progress in the nature-related negotiations. And I already included, Ingrid, your presentation, so you can continue from your screen now.
Thank you so much, Eunice. And just apologies to everybody. My video is not working, so you can't see where I am and who I am.
No, we see you this time.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Oh, well, that's good news. Okay.
So you should be prepared not
yes.
to make any mistake.
Good point. Okay. I'm glad my video is working. So just very quickly, there's no news yet on the sort of content of the CBD intersessional meetings. We just have dates. The dates are for late October for the, there's two intersessionals. The one is the CEST meeting. The other one is the SBI. And they sort of on both sides of the Convention on Migratory Species, COP. So the one is the week just before, it's the week ending in 21st of October. And then the second one will be held from the last week of October actually over into November. But we don't have agendas or anything of that yet. The big event this year is going to be the Convention on Migratory Species, COP. And that's important for us because this is the first year we're going to be introducing some element of city and subnational involvement. Exactly what the modalities will be, we're still in discussions, but it's very exciting for us and in this particular space. And then I think the one that is of particular interest to many cities, particularly those cities that are being ravaged by flooding and extreme weather events, is to touch on the wetland program. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands has a city wetland accreditation scheme. And if essentially what that does is it's open to cities to have their wetlands accredited. They become part of this whole big network. And wetlands, as you know, have a very important role as being nature's sinks. They help us with things like water quality, they're filters. They are also very important forms of ecosystems for flood attenuation and for helping get rid of major flood waters. So this is a very important program. There is a regional center in East Asia, which is based in Korea, and they are organizing the second roundtable of wetland city mayors, which will be taking place in Amiens in France from the 8th to the 10th of June. And anybody who's interested and wants to know more about this, please get in touch with me. I'll put my email into the chat box. That's all I have, and so look forward to next month.
Thank you, Ingrid. As you mentioned, really the wetlands, water are both an opportunity for adaptation, but even for mitigation, they are important resources. So it is important because the high-level action champion is the chair of the IUCN. She is particularly interested to bring this discussion to the table as well. So it's very good that you are able to raise this issue as well. Duncan from Glasgow City Council, a long-time friend and a wonderful host of COP26, is with us. Duncan, we're happy to have you the floor for your intervention.
Thanks very much, Eunice. Can I just check if people can hear me okay?
Very good, very well.
That's great. Thanks very much. I'm just mindful of the opportunities for us to make common cause with other global networks as well. And I was on a call this morning with the Global Resilient Cities Network that was talking about, I think, an MOU with ICLEI to work together, and also one with C40. And I'm conscious that many of the cities and regions on the call here this afternoon will be connected into these other networks as well. And really, my point was just following up what Ingrid was saying, was just about maximizing our opportunities to get that common urban or local voice in the coming months as we head towards COP28, and that we find ourselves increasingly able to travel, to attend in person, but still, like today, working with our partners through different digital media. So our leader, Councillor Susan Aitken, who welcomed people to COP26 in November of 2021, it seems like a long time ago now, Eunice, is looking forward to working with other mayors throughout the rest of the world, but throughout the rest of the year as well. And it was just to re-emphasize that point about mayors, city leaders, and those of us who are there to serve the elected administrations working together.
That's fantastic to hear, Duncan, especially the leadership from Glasgow, Council Leader Aitken, Scottish government has been instrumental to carry the spirit of Glasgow COP to Sharm el-Sheikh, and of course across the whole work of our constituency, especially as you would rightly remember, we have introduced the climate justice with the emphasis from Council Leader Aitken, and as you have seen now, we have put it very prominently in the debate on Stocktake. And since you have mentioned that her availability throughout the engagement in the calendar of activities, I think this is also again for us to remind ourselves that the agenda will be getting particularly busy over the coming months, especially in June. We're expecting a peak. There will also be in April, Cities Summit of Americas, where U.S. State Department is making a fantastic example of multi-level collaboration, in addition to Earth Day. In May, we have this UN Disaster Sendai Framework Review. In June, it will be particularly busy. Second UN Assembly in Nairobi, UN Conference in Bonn, the Brussels Urban Summit, Daring Cities, MetCop in Tangier. These are all agendas that we'll touch in June. July is back to New York for the high-level political forum. Then we will come to New York once again, September, for the high-level week with this SDG Summit, Climate Action Summit. In October is our peak because of the Urban October, and then we will go to the COP28. So it's fantastic to hear availability of Council Leader, and this I think would also be inspirational for others. This is, I mean, you have seen the presence and then dialogues still helping us to put our cause better on the table. When they interact, of course, it always changes the impact. So we're very happy to hear that. I see a couple of inputs from Felix, our dear friend. Felix, feel free to take the floor if you want. I see you have put some points, but you can also interact personally, directly.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
It's a bit deep.
Is that any better?
Much better.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of things. One of the co-chairs of the transitional committee is Richard Sherman, who has been a friend of ICLEI's in the 2000s before he went into government. Good contact for you guys. The other thing, so no date yet for the Climate Ambition Summit, but they're looking for initiatives which will be new, which will move it forward. And I don't know whether local government can think about that between now and then to announce. The thing, I'm working on something which may or may not happen, which is trying to get a coalition of the willing together to halve nitrogen waste by 2030. I'm trying to get a government to lead it. It'd be a bit like the methane pledge. So you'd have a number of governments signing up.
Can you repeat this focus? The half?
So the climate ambitions, do you mean the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been working on nitrogen. It's one of the worst planetary boundaries issue. And so, and it's all over the intergovernmental process. You can find it in the CBD, the UNCCD, UNEP's got a group on it, and it's part of the agriculture discussions. And so the idea is to try and copy the methane pledge and get a pledge on halving nitrogen waste by 2030. I'm still trying to find a lead government. I have governments in support, but I don't yet have a lead government for it. But that will be an example of what could be done as a climate ambition. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for really things that are going to kind of turn the needle.
Well, that's great, Felix. I think it's always good to have your enthusiasm and creating new spaces and new ambitions and new coalitions. Congratulations. And I look forward to personally, of course, all the other partners look forward to contributing as appropriate. Coming back to the Climate Ambition Summit, Chris Decky from Slowcat says it's not there yet, but obviously the peak days of the New York Climate Agenda or the UN General Assembly agenda is 18th to 23rd, as far as I know, of September. So we can expect that the Climate Ambition Summit will be somewhere in between those days. On that point, I think one of the things that we are struggling, honestly speaking, Felix, yes, we know the UN Secretary General says that there's no free lunch, there's no free ticket. In order to showcase there, you have to commit. I know our members, our constituency, have always tried to respond as much as possible to such expectations and going forward as high as possible. But I think we are reaching into a level of saturation or even a fatigue of commitments, a fatigue of always asking us to commit and never giving us back anything. This has been a very clear issue in the race to zero. We told everyone, yes, these are cities who are considering or they are committing to sign up, but be aware, be realistic. None of them can reach to those race to zero or race to resilience goals by 2030 within their own municipal budgets. They need additional mechanisms. That's why we were always asking for multi-level collaboration. For me, if under this logic, I would be much more happy if all of those governments that we're working on, and that is exactly the language in the Urban 7 Mayors Summit, the declaration that we invite G7, of course, because they are much more responsible and resourceful, to come up with initial commitments for multi-level action. If Japan is working on 100 regions, if EU is working on 100 carbon neutral cities, if EUS is creating this initiatives like Scale and Cities Forward, we want them to be reflected to the global deals as well, that others can also join and make sure that we are working together. I would personally wish an ambitious summit outcome like that, if possible. But of course, I'm not the decision maker. I'm not the Secretary General, but we can still try to build bridges among our partners and peers and leaders to push for it. So let's see how much we can advance. I mean, I'm really interested to see the outcome of the Cities Summit of Americas in April. It will be probably very interesting. We will see how it will evolve. We will hope to see the initiatives that we've created, the surge, all these things to be scaled up. In that sense, once again, we hope that it is really time to push national governments. So let's see how much we can move forward. And thanks for reminding of Richard Sherman. I was not aware, so definitely is an opportunity for us to get back. Just for you to note, we were discussing very much with Scottish government to send a representative to this meeting. Then it was not possible. From their report, we have seen there's a case study by C40 on the Dhaka experience. We were thinking of taking them to this meeting on behalf of LGMA. We have reserved 3 seats, but unfortunately we could not fill any of them. But I think for the next one, we should be much more better prepared. and make sure that our voices are heard effectively. Felix, I think you have another point.
It was just building on what you've been discussing before and what you've just said. The chances are that the Loss and Damage Fund will predominantly fund infrastructure and for LLDCs and LDCs, and it'll take a while to do it. There's another issue that's clearly on the Secretary General's agenda, and which is again across the issue and which you are already contributing to, which is the building of resilience and the issue around vulnerable populations. And maybe there's a conversation we could have separately about whether there's some pilots to be done to focus on helping children that are hit by disasters as a way of doing it. I'm working with IFAD and the Caribbean Development Bank to look at farmers and fisherfolk as a possible fund to get money there quicker than waiting for this process to just finish when a lot of people won't benefit at the vulnerable groups level.
That's a very good point, Felix. In the morning, Councillor Gilliland also mentioned this when she was intervening at the loss and damage topic in the Copenhagen Ministerial. She said that there was also very positive feedbacks, especially from the least developed countries and the global south, because they were also suffering a lot. So I think we have to really build upon our connection that we are active in the G7, but we're also active in the most needed urban communities like Mozambique, like Quelimane, like Malawi, and then we had the mayor of Lusaka at COP addressing all the challenges she's having, so we can really bridge them and offer to the table. I am expecting Scottish government will also announce operationalization of their additional £3 million project by June. So we could also look forward to how this will evolve. And I fully agree that we should expand our partnership. So that's why the discussions in June is extremely important. While we're talking, I'm happy that my colleague Kata has shared with you in the chat box the link to our multi-level action pavilion expression of interest. So feel free to insert your ideas there. We could start preparing in advance earlier so that we can make sure the pavilion is really responding to our expectations and designed as effective as possible. Other than that, if there are any other contributions, feel free to raise your hand. We can unmute you and you can interact, or you can type in the chat box. Felix, go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to lower my hand and failed dismally.
That's always the technical glitches, but it's all okay. No worries. I think we have reached to a conclusion, so we can always save a couple of minutes in our lives and use it for other purposes. I'd like to thank you all, Ingrid, Duncan, Felix, all your contributions. Councillor Gillard on her behalf, who was with us in the morning, and we will make sure her reflections are also shared widely, and to all the participants of this webinar for your interaction, and more importantly, please make sure you start to talk to your constituency whether they can start scheduling a half a day or a 1 day stock take for climate emergency sessions in your city halls, in your regional parliaments, and make sure that this tracks the topics that we are encouraging. Really, this is important because the way stock take discussion will shape in Dubai is not clear. There's nobody who has any idea on what's going on, what could happen. Therefore, the way we shaped the discussions, I think, will be extremely helpful for the nations also to shape their discussion. So be bold, use this opportunity. Yes, actually, I thought we have shared it. Kata, do you remember the link to the guidebook we have shared? We will release it again, but let me just stop sharing my screen and find you the link. I forgot it again. Just give me 1 second so that we we'll
Is it
find
the one you
this.
shared this morning?
This morning, the last one.
Let me quickly check.
It was a Google Doc again.
1 second.
It is, by
I
the
think
way,
I have it. Yes.
good. All the points we discussed about the Zero Forum, the Urban Seven Mayors Declaration, the report of Scottish Government, the adaptation submission, the recording of LGMA webinars, the guidebook, the toolkit are all available in our bulletin. So that's the important message, that you should keep subscribe to this bulletin so that you receive all these, and even circulate it very easily to your partners and peers. And also, we are looking forward to your inputs to the discussion and your announcement, so that we can populate with the diversity of and the richness of the LGMA constituency. Your reports, your documents, your meetings are all able to find their space in this bulletin, just like we have announced the multi-level action pavilion as our home for cities and subnationals inside the blue zone. LGMA bulletin is also your, how do you call it, I don't forget the English name, but amplifier or radio channel for reaching out to the world. So with this, Kale, thanks that you have shared the link, and we will make sure this is available starting from next week. I think the LGMA website will also be much more resourceful to have access to all the documents we discussed, and so that you can access to them in a user-friendly manner. Thank you. If not, I am now really this time closing, because we really reached to the end of our talk now. Thank you all and have a nice day.